Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to WCS America Premier League. We are in the middle of Group G in the Winners Series. It's going to be Sen versus Crank, 1-1. Now we're going into the ace match. Axlev, why are these games getting so good?
Of course, because we have players who are so good at Starcraft. Sen, one of the best players performance-wise outside of Korea versus Crank, the ace PVZ player in the Axiom House, and actually one of the ace Protoss players out there in the entire world. A very, very tough match. Of course, we're in Game 3. It's tied up 1-1. The winner of this map will advance to the round of 16. The loser will drop down and have one more chance to advance in the final match of the night.
And if he loses yet again there, of course, he's going to go down to the Challenger bracket, and then he's going to have to fight his way through the Challenger bracket to make his way into Season 2's Premier League yet again. But we're just taking a second here to wait for Sen. Sen probably taking a moment here, just saying, I just beat Axiom Crank. I need a couple of seconds here to kind of recompose myself. After some amazing play from myself, he's giving himself a pat on the back, I'm sure. And once we get the ready from him, yes, we have. We're going to get on into game number 3.
Well, this one is going to be a tricky map for Sen. The map is Daybreak, and Sen, who loves just throwing roaches and hydras at his opponent until they crumble, this map isn't really as well suited for that style. Of course, if you combine Abducts, you can still sometimes make it work, but we saw on Whirlwind, Crank was more than able to deal with that Roach Hydra Viper force. We might see Sen use Mulus in Daybreak.
Sen getting immediately into the game and saying, wait, is this map right? Well, we'll have to wait a second for that to be answered, but it doesn't matter. Let's take the players and positions while we wait for that. Spawning down here in the bottom left-hand corner. Oh, wait, we can still move in spectator mode now.
That's right.
About that.
Well, we're going to get a double check on the map, make sure we're here in the correct map. Seems like there's a little bit of confusion here. We'll figure that out in just a second. Meanwhile, it looks like actually Crank is not sure which was supposed to be the right map. So we're going to grab a hold of an admin and find out what player vetoed which map. We'll try to get the right map sorted out for you guys. But either way, it's going to be a very exciting match. I'm actually a little bit surprised Sen didn't veto Daybreak, even considering that Daybreak is historically a map that some Zergs like. But a Zerg like Sen, who just is all about overwhelming his opponent early on with those low-tech units, Daybreak often gets in those late-game kind of split map type of situations.
He got into a bit of a bind in his first matches today against Capoche. He had to give up his third and his fourth bases in order to barely hold off Capoche and then turn the game around. So I can see why he doesn't really want to play on Daybreak. He already had a tough time on it in game number 1, and that was not against Axiom Crank. That was against, another Protoss opponent who didn't have as prestigious a record as Axiom's Crank.
It does look like Daybreak was vetoed by Crank, actually. So the correct last map is going to be Neo Planet S.
A great map. We've seen it a couple of times already today. In fact, you see it a lot on WCS America. But I think that's a much better map. Neo Planet S got 2 huge different attack paths, and I think it's going to allow him to use that low-tech unit composition that he loves so much in order to get a lot of the map under his control.
It's definitely, I think, probably a better map for Sen. As you said, the one thing you have to be careful about as a Zerg on Neo Planet S is not an insane distance between your base and your opponent. So there are a lot of strong 2-base timings. You could see Crank go for one of those. He did do that in the last game as well. But if a Protoss tries to take a third against a Zerg like Sen, who's so good at massing those units, the third on Neo Planet S is very, very hard to defend.
Now, the question here is whether or not Crank is actually going to go for another huge aggressive opening. Now, he kind of lost a lot in game number 2 there when he went for that huge aggressive opening, and Sen was ready for it. Sen, very, very fond of those low-tech units, was just able to mass out so many of them and take on an Archon, a Mortal and Colossus huge push with just roaches, and then started peppering in a couple of Zergling later on. That's
right.
going to be a question of what is Crank thinking about in this next game.
Crank, I think he's going to think, okay, I don't want to do a late 2-base timing, because Protoss 2-base timings, when you do with a later tech, you can expect a Zerg is probably maxed out in roaches if you're hitting, post 11-minute mark at the level of play we're at here. Sen, of course, is going to max out very fast. And then you're thinking, okay, well, that means his army's so much bigger than mine. I have to hope that he charges in from one direction and I can kill him with force fields. And Sen's already proven that, no, he's smart enough to to use multiple control groups, attack from multiple angles. So I don't think we're going to see that late 2-base timing. We may see some very early aggression. Some Zealot Phoenix combination, and then taking a third behind that, or maybe even just going straight to a third base like he did on Whirlwind.
Now we're just waiting for Sen to get back in the lobby. Somehow, in the 2 seconds that we started with the new lobby, Sen apparently went MIA for a couple of seconds there. But it looks like he has joined the lobby. Is he ready to go? If so, we can get on into Neoplanet S in the ace match of Crank versus Sen. This is the winners series once again. The loser of this will have to take on in the losers series. And then past that, we'll see who goes on into round of 16 and who does not.
This is going to be a very, very important match because whoever loses this match is going to have one more series deciding, and no player wants to be in a situation where they lose that series or all of a sudden out of the Premier Division and into that Challenger Division.
All right, once again, guys, we're spawning on Neoplanet S. Spawning down here in the bottom left-hand corner from Team Axiom. Spawning in the blue trunks, it is Crank. And up here in the top right-hand corner, our red Zerg player from Team Gamma Bears, it is Sen. Now, I noticed yesterday we had some pretty fancy cinematography going on during the spawning locations and player positions.
Rotterdam, of course, a true professional, not only at casting, but also at doing the player introduction video cameras. Definitely, probably, I think Adabisi needs to talk to Rotterdam a bit.
Yeah,
Rotterdam
right. Yeah, being an official observer, I think Adabisi and Rotterdam need to have a little bit of a discussion. Rotterdam can show him some tips.
Yeah,
School him a little bit. Tell him this is exactly how you do it, and this is how you do it well. Because those were some amazing intros yesterday. Rotterdam, definitely a veteran in the craft of Starcraft, the game we're playing. In case you didn't know, you're just watching just some random game on Twitch.
So going for the Gateway first opening, we haven't seen this from Crank yet against Sen. So first 2 games, of course, he went for that Forge expansion. This is the opening that Kapachi was using as well. And I think on Neoplanet S, this is a better opening. If you go with the standard Forge expansion, your opponent gets the 3 hatches up very early, and they start massing roaches, it can be a little bit tricky on this map to defend that type of play. But it looks like Crank's to say, okay, I'm going to throw him off his timings a little bit by going to Gateway opening. And the question is, how is that going to affect Sen? Is he going to say, I don't care, I'm just going to go, my normal 3-hatch build anyway and just get speed leans a little bit faster to deal with any potential early Gateway units? Or is he going to play a totally different style?
Well, if Crank goes for some pretty early aggression, he's got a very short rush distance, especially if Sen goes for that third base. That third base is incredibly close to your natural here for the Protoss player. So if he goes around the north side of the map, Crank's going to be able to get units there very, very quickly and do a lot of damage, possibly putting Sen into a position where he's going to have to sacrifice his third base. But if he doesn't, if he just wants to try and feign aggression, then we could see that Sen actually plays a little bit more defensively and maybe doesn't go for that third base as quick.
Of course, we see Sen immediately going for the extractor as soon as he knows his opponent didn't go for the fast nexus. Some Zergs will mind to some gas and go ahead and take that third base. And some Zergs instead will just actually stay on 2-base tech. I'm pretty sure Sen is going to take that third hatchery. That is his favorite style, of course. In fact, we even see some Zerglings going down there to probably check around. He wants to get in front of Crank's base as fast as possible, because as soon as you put those Zerglings in front of your opponent's base, you can see any unit that leaves. You can keep track of any hidden probes, any Zealot, a Stalker poking out, anything like that. Get that little extra heads up.
A couple of Zergling brother coming in. Going to be taking a look at the natural. They are brothers, of course, because they both share the same egg. And then, so I guess they're twins as well. Possibly female. Who knows? They could be a sister and a brother. But the Zergling getting in, getting a very nice scout off of what's going on here in Crank's base. Going to note that there's only 2 guys in each of those gases.
Oh, is one of them going to die? Ah, poor little guy. Just a couple claws left. But his friend, actually, his friend doubles back yet again.
His friend is doing rather well and is actually going to probably be able to escape unless the
he's trying to carry the body home. He grabs his old buddy's body. Is he going to take it home? No, he's just going to move around the base a little bit more.
Well, that's just rude. Now he's not even cleaning up the mess that his friend left. He's just going to leave it somewhere else. Double the mess, actually, because as soon as he dies, there's going to be 2 bodies.
Of course, Sen did not take his drones off gas after starting speed, continues to mine gas. So, in fact, adding in another gas geyser as well. So we're going to see some type of tech play out of Sen.
Now, do you think this is going to be going straight into lair, or do you think we're going to be seeing some roach play?
Oh, it's definitely lair. There's no way Sen would start that roach warren before the lair. If he does want to go roaches, he would still get the lair first either way. So definitely going to be getting the lair. The question is he going to get it after upgrades or before upgrades? It looks like he's going to get those upgrades first. So he could be going for that style you were talking about earlier, with the upgraded speedings into Ultralists. And on Planet S, that's a very strong style because there's so many paths around this map that speedings can run around. It's very hard for Protoss to put on aggression while defending from speed encounters at the same time.
And a really interesting choice here is going to go for Pneumatized Carapace, making those Overlords incredibly speedy. And he's going to be able to get a lot more map information from those speedy Overlords and be able to dive into the Protoss' base, possibly without even losing the Overlord, making them dive in there and dive out so quickly that they are not able to get taken out. But unfortunately, Phoenix is starting to come out here, so this first Overlord is actually going to die before he even dives in there.
An unhappy Overlord. He knows he's about to get that speed upgrade, but against a Phoenix, he's still no match for its great mobility. Gonna fall down in either case. And it's almost, there's not much point in scouting anymore because he knows what his opponent is doing. He knows it was that Stargate play after the expansion. Interestingly enough, right after he got Warp Gate, Crank went straight into +1 air weapons. So, realizing that, okay, this is a map where it's very hard to take a third base on. So maybe I just won't even worry about trying to control the ground. Instead, just get a lot of air units and play off 2 bases for a very long time.
Meanwhile, Sen trying to fend off these Phoenixes from taking out all of the drones here. Spore Crawler is still under construction. He is going to fend them off for now. But with those increased air weapons, those Phoenixes are going to be able to take out drones very, very quickly. Going to be able to dive in even when the Spore Crawler is there and take out drones very quickly. Also going to scout out the third base. Sees as there's no third base. Very, very different for a Sen style. Did he see the spawning hatchery? No, he didn't. So he didn't see the hatchery at the 3 o'clock position either.
Sen, of course, using these speedings to scout his opponent out, making sure his opponent is not taking that third base, making sure that he can keep very good eyes on what his opponent's up to. Crank gets that +1 air weapons, but he actually is not continuing to produce air units.
Actually making more photon cannons at his front. Oh no, it's actually his first photon cannon.
That's right, of course, opening with the Gateway expansion and getting the Forge much later allowed him to get that Stargate faster than normal. But of course, he is a little bit behind in upgrades compared to where Protoss would like to be if they open with that Forge expansion.
Folks in the front with the Zergling did see the Robo facility, did also notice that it probably isn't making anything, so he's going to feel a little bit better not seeing any type of Colossus or Immortal timings.
Crank continued to add tech structure after tech structure into his composition, knowing that, okay, you know, I can't really go out and kill him because he hasn't expanded that aggressively. But at the same time, I don't really want to take a third base because there could be all these speedings out there, and this is a map kind of difficult to take a third base early on. So it looks like Crank is actually going to go for a timing attack later down the road. He's no longer building probes. He's actually stopped at 53, so maybe he'll take a late third. Or it could be he's trying to hard counter this Ultras competition, going double Robo for both Immortals and Colossi.
Yeah, that's going to be a very scary composition for these Ultralisks to deal with. The Immortals, of course, do tons of damage against Ultralisks because they are armored. And they're a pretty good counter to the Ultralisks themselves in damage. Hardened Shields as well take a lot of the Ultralisk damage and mitigate that only down to 10. So it's going to be difficult for those Ultralisks to do a lot of damage, but of course, as long as Sen is the master of positioning, we've seen him time and time again, he's going to get into a position where it doesn't even matter if he's got all those Immortals. Sen's just going to bait him into a place where he's going to completely surround and crush him. 2
Immortals being produced now. If Sen can get in there and scout at his opponent's going double Robo Immortal, he could just not build Ultralisks and just use Speedings, Queens, and then add in, you know, potentially Swarm Host, potentially Roaches, potentially Muted Transition, or even just go pure Speeding against an opponent who doesn't have that many Colossi.
The key part of the Immortals is that you have to make sure that those Immortals are not going to be spending their shots on Zergling, because there are going to be so many Zergling out here for Sen. He's going to have to make sure that he shift clicks the Ultralisks, and if he zones the Ultralisk away from the Immortals, then the Immortals are just going to have to use their shots on Zergling, and that's not at all what Crank's going to want to spend his shots on at all, because the Immortal has a bit of a slow attack, and using them on Zergling is not really using those Immortals to the peak of their performance.
Crank moving out to take a third base. This composition is very Zealot heavy. Of course, this is what we saw on Whirlwind as well. If you go more Zealots and less Stalkers in your composition as Protoss, it gives you so much more gas to play with, so you can add a lot more of those high-tech units.
Phoenix is poking in here saying, hello, Zerg Army. How's it going? Zerg Army says, not so well. We can't fly like you guys can. These mountains are kind of depressing for us. We can't see around them, though we can see the gold below us. Nobody's actually interested in going to the gold because huge exposure. So this is the one time in your life you don't want to go for the gold. You want to own for, you know, just standard minerals.
The question here is, how is Sen going to follow this up? Of course, he's realized his opponent's taking a third base now, and he should be assuming his opponent is going to be getting a competition to counter his. Now, if Crank makes really good walls, it's going to be difficult for Sen to really get a good engagement, as his primary damage dealing units are those Ultralisks, and those guys need to get up close to do damage. So he's going to start moving out here, but he needs to push the creep to have the Queens in action, or he could just take more expansions and wait for his opponent to move out before engaging.
Sen just has to be incredibly careful about the distance in between. I'm sorry, actually, Crank has to be incredibly careful about the distance between the natural and the third base. Now, all of Sen's army is going to try and position itself right in that little spot. As long as Crank can't stop him from getting into that spot and then being able to put on pressure to the third or natural to his choosing, Crank's going to be in a pretty good position. Now, it looks like he's wedging himself in there pretty well. The Ultralisk now getting into that position. The Queens are actually starting coming in here as
Colossus, be careful. Oh, it skedaddles up the cliff. It should be safe, but now Crank's coming out here to engage.
The Queens are so slow, they're not able to get into the army. Fungal Growths are being thrown down on the Colossus, but the Colossus, the Immortals, and everything else are doing so much damage. Where are the Zergling here for Sen?
Zergings, of course, went to the natural, died to the Colossus Zealot competition. Some transfuses going down, but not enough as Crank keeps cutting backwards, has so many Immortals, and Sen's army is falling apart here.
Sen's army, of course, just a little bit too fast for those Queens. Those Queens waddle so slowly, and now they're being roasted. Oh, that is a very sad sight to see. But they actually look really cool when they die. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but they do. Queens look awesome when they die.
Long live the Queens. They are all dead.
Kill a Queen.
Of course, Crank still has 4 Immortals and 3 Colossi left after that battle. That's a very strong force. All he has to do is re-add some more gateway units. He's definitely in a strong advantage now, especially considering, similar to the game in Whirlwind, Sen never took a 4th base.
Yeah, this is going to be a little bit difficult spot here. Sen basically just starting to get, but the high-tech army once again coming out here from Crank is just going to be a lot to deal with for any type of army composition that Sen can come up with, especially with the army composition that he's relying on so far. He can't really tech switch hugely.
Templar are now being added into the mix for Crank. Crank is up by 15 food, and he has this insanely supply-efficient army as well. It's not just like food of Zealots and Stalkers. It's all Colossi, Archon, Immortal. He's going to slowly push in here, and as he gets closer and closer to being maxed out, Sen, with no Infestors, only Ultralisk and trying to rebuild those Queens, I don't know if he can beat this army.
I mean, half of Crank's army right now are really good, or more than half, are really good at killing Zergling, and the other half are really good at killing Ultralisks, and that's pretty much all that Sen's got for his composition. It's just Ultralisks and Zergling. He's going to hope for a miracle engagement, but still, Crank is going to do a lot of damage before he's even going to be quelled.
The battle's on creep. This will allow the Zerg to close the distance much faster. Ultras coming in now, but there's just so many Immortals. The Ultras are being melted. One Archon goes down, the second Archon very low, it might fall, but the Ultras were just like paper. There was no transfuses there, not enough Queens were around, and so many Immortals.
Crank just tearing through that army like it was nothing. That was an incredible engagement. Didn't even lose that many units. I think he lost a couple of Zealots, maybe one Immortal. And that is just, I mean, that's just awesome. We can see here, here's the setup for that engagement. And as soon as the engagement happens, you know, just time and time again, those Immortals were just destroying those Ultralisks with that heavy damage that they deal.
You know, Crank really basically customized his army to counter Sen's from the start of the game. And this is a situation as a Zerg player. If you're going to devote all your money into one tech that can be countered like that, it's really important to try to scout out your opponent and see what they're doing beforehand. So if Sen was somehow able to get that scout off, he could have maybe transitioned to Spire play and got into Broodlords, and Crank would have had maybe a little bit harder time dealing with that. But either way, I mean, Sen pretty much, his build from the start was always aimed at the Ultralisk. Crank identified that and just built the perfect composition to take that apart.
All right, guys, so that's going to be a 2-1 victory there for Crank over Sen. So it's going to throw Sen into the losers match at the later end of the night. But before we get there, we're going to get into another match, so stay around. We'll be right back. This is MLG WCS America Premier League. Stay tuned.